Good afternoon, everyone. There's just a few of us filing in. We're a couple minutes away from the start of the webinar. I'm Christopher Allen, and we'll be kicking off and hosting today's presentation. About to go on mute. If you have any questions, please be sure to use the Q&A pane on Zoom. Thanks so much for coming, and we'll get started here in just a minute. As attendees are filing in, go ahead and see if you can't find the Q&A button on the Zoom panel. And it might be fun to have a few of you enter in where you're listening from today, and that'll just give us an indication that everybody's got their technology up and running. And we'll start here in just a minute. All right, well, on my computer, it says it is 11 a.m. Central Time, so why don't we get started? Again, my name is Christopher Allen. Thanks for coming to today's presentation. I am joined by Mike Hruska and Dr. Michael Allen, and today we're talking about learning ecosystem design. But I thought I'd just take a couple seconds here and pass it over to both the Michaels to talk a little bit about why we're doing these webinars together.
Yes, hi. Well, welcome everyone. I hope you're maybe having better weather than we are. If you can see behind me, it's snowing here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Winter came way too soon. Decided we shouldn't have fall this year, so we jumped right to it. So we'll do the same thing. We'll jump right to the content here. I've been CEO of Allen Interactions for 26 years, and we produced a lot of training programs for mostly major corporations around the world. Our studios have won lots of awards, and we're very proud of that. But all these years, I've been really frustrated in that so rarely will our clients study the impact of what we've provided for them. And especially rare that they've studied the impact on business goals. They may have studied the outcomes in terms of, do the trainees remember what we taught them? Can they perform these skills? But even that's too rare. And also rare is the design of a training program to specifically focus on business goals. Very often we hear people need to be able to do this, or they need to stop doing that. And that's probably true, it's probably right. But are those the most important business goals? Are we really going to get return on investment from that training? Too often, I think the leadership of an organization doesn't want to talk about training because they don't feel like, I know those words and I know those concepts, so I'm going to look kind of out of my element, so I don't want to talk about that. And similarly, people in training feel like the business concepts and all of those challenges, constraints are something that they're just not equipped to address. And so we kind of have these two silos. We have the business leadership and we have the training enterprise, and they barely connect, even though they're really trying to work together for a common goal. So today is a particularly exciting day for me because over the past couple of years, we've had the opportunity of working closely with a company we've admired for a long time. That's Problem Solutions. And Mike Hruska, who's with us today, was the CEO of that company. And yesterday, he and his team and our team had a little celebration, champagne celebration to celebrate that the two companies have now come together and we are working as one. And that parallels what I'm saying we need the training and corporate leadership in many organizations need to do. They need to come together as one. In this merger, Problem Solutions and Mike's team brings to us the ability to analyze what's going on, to track what's going on, to connect systems that are business systems and training systems together with advanced software and analytics to help these two viewpoints become one. And I'm really excited about that. So really at the very beginning, it's important to start out on the right foot with a strategic analysis. Are we doing the right training? Do we know what the purpose of this training is? Where are we going to go? We also believe that Agile is a very, very important methodology to help make sure that you stay on track and you're addressing the most important opportunities as you go. We also feel that organizations often don't have a CLO either at all or one that is versed in both sides of business and training, even though that's their function. And so through the Allen Academy, we have created a program to certify CLOs. And when CLOs aren't available, we're even set up now to be able to provide a fractional CLO for organizations to help them get focused and go on the right track. So everything soup to nuts, from the analysis to the design, the development of high impact learning experiences, all the way through staffing and engineering the system. I'm just really proud to say that Allen Interactions has all of these services at the highest level of professionalism in the industry. So with that, I'm excited to share with you some of the perceptions and concepts and principles we think are helpful to organization in achieving optimal success.
Fantastic. Thanks for that terrific introduction. And again, if you're just joining us, the three speakers here today are Dr. Michael Allen, Michael Hruska, and I'm Christopher Allen. So let's jump into our presentation and talk a little bit about what the market is seeing from the perspective of the type of business impact that L&D is making. And I'm going to pass this over to Mike Hruska.
Great. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for taking time to learn more together today. This came from LinkedIn Learning a few years ago, and it's interesting because they're interviewing CEOs of Fortune 500 companies around the things that they were interested in achieving from learning. Now, business impact is actually the #1 thing that CEOs are interested in measuring. However, only about 8% of them that they said that they saw any kind of impact from learning and development. Also considered to be critically important is the idea of return on investment. And only about 4% saw that. However, 90% of these folks said that closing the skills gap was a #1 business imperative for them. I really found that this stat resonated greatly with me. Appearance of activity doesn't equal progress, and we as L&D professionals in serving our business really need to think about creating things that really provide business value and impact and ultimately some kind of R&D. So the question is, how do we do that?
What's also interesting is on the screen here, we've got a couple bullets saying, that half of S&P 500 companies have disappeared in the last 15 years. And that there are a lot of different industries that are closing and getting eaten up by other folks that have innovated in the space. And when I'm thinking about, making an investment in training, the general expectation is that something is going to change in the business, and that's going to help us perform better. And we're not seeing it. And I think not only do business leaders not see it, but I think students also see little or no value in the training that they're being presented. And that's an issue. So click over to this next one.
So Christopher Allen and I recently participated and are on the advisory board for HR.com, and they did a survey of the capacity and the state of learning technology amongst their participants. There's some really good data that they have, but found some really interesting things that only about 16% of folks are thinking that their L&D function is really excellent. So if we have 8% of CEOs saying, boy, I'm actually seeing something, and 16% of L&D folks are saying we're doing a good job, we're really on the wrong end of the scale. And the other side of that is only about 22% of those L&D professionals agree that their learners are actually engaged. The opportunity here is really big for some type of transformation. But once again, the question is, how do we do that? So in order to do differently, we need to start to think differently. And that's what we want to outline for you today, is a number of different tools and methods that might help you start to do differently, but first enable you to think differently.
Yeah, and tools that also speak to these items. Mike and I were at ATD ICE together, and we were sitting in the lounge for ATD members, and we were starting to pencil in what are the other topics that we might want to speak at next year at this particular conference. And on a big monitor was this chart outlining what are the pain points of people in L&D and what are they currently facing with. And we've used a number of methods since May to ask audiences and participants in workshops, what are the challenges that they're really faced with. And there are hard challenges to overcome, but they seem to be pretty universal. The data in this one, I think notionally can be confirmed that very few organizations feel like they have the budgeted resources to make an impact. They're not getting buy-in or follow-up from the people that are above them and the managers that they need to serve. That so little of the training that they are producing actually aligns to the business. And that one, really resonates with the first two slides that we were just showing on market data, that, the business is looking for impact, but they're not getting it. And training professionals who are tasked with building it are looking at what's being asked to be included in this content in their training and seeing that it's just not matching up with the type of performance outcome that they're looking at. The one that we hear a lot of course, is that L&D folks feel like they're order takers, and they're so far removed from being able to make a good strategic decision about what should be invested in, what are the skills that really need focus. And it's all about how quickly can you turn out material, and can you turn it out under budget, because you're not going to get the full budget that you need in order to make a difference.
Well, one of the things that I'm really interested in, there were about 500 people that took this survey on site at ATD. I'm interested in the participants today, and do any of these resonate with you as your number one pain when you think about dealing inside of your organization or within your broader organization? And if it's not one of these, what is it? I love data, and I love understanding data, and we have to understand what our obstacles are before we can blow through them. So if you wouldn't mind, just throw into the chat which one of these might be like the number one thing that if you could change that singular thing, that you feel like your life would be better tomorrow.
It is interesting, as David pointed out, that the percentages of these are fairly equally distributed. And in some way, I think they're all sort of symptoms of the same problems. So lack of resources, lack of time, lack of getting
buy-in.
Buy-in from management. So for all of those, in a way, just cluster together in my mind a little bit. That this is the same mechanism that's working against us here, it's the most. I spoke at a conference last week, and so reliably, almost every time I speak, somebody comes up and asks me, "How do you get C-level support for what we're doing? How do we get that?" And there are a bunch of different ways that can work, and you never know. It depends on the organization and the individuals, and whether CEO is fearful of talking about this or feels like it's not important enough or doesn't have enough time. But they're all people, and nobody likes to waste their time or be bored. And if we can get to them just 15 or 20 minutes and show them two different approaches, would you like our people being trained this way and you show them, some PowerPoint bulleted slides? Or would you like them being trained this way, where they're actually challenged to perform and get feedback? They'll almost always, just as every person will, they'll pick what we would say is the right one, the one that's more interesting. And so we do have ways, and instead of just stewing about it, I think this presentation is going to suggest we got to stand up and fight and do something different that can change these perceptions and these mechanisms.
Thanks to everybody who entered items into the chat. Yeah, these are fantastic comments. So let's move on to an example of what really great might look like. And I am going to launch a course here, just a second.
It's great as he's doing that. It's great not only in the support and the training that it gives people to be successful in their jobs, but it's great because it was attuned to and focused on a business challenge from the very outset.
So you're looking at Mary Kay University for beauty consultants, and we had a really awesome opportunity to work with Mary Kay and create a new digital university for folks who are interested in becoming beauty consultants and to start selling for the first time. Just a tiny bit about this population of people. A Mary Kay beauty consultant isn't an employee of Mary Kay. They are an independent business, and they come from all walks of life. And it's people who have business degrees, are interested in setting up a large business, maybe having lots of beauty consultants working for them and with them, all the way down to somebody who's fresh into the country. Is English might not be their first language. They need to find a way to support their family. They've never done held a sales position before, or it's somebody who's looking to kind of do this as a hobby. Maybe sell cosmetics to their friends, have a way to connect with other people, and make maybe just enough so that they can have the cosmetics and things that they would like to have. What we're looking at is the full breadth of this curriculum, and just a couple things that really tie into the business challenges that they have when training and starting new consultants. And that is, they need to help a new consultant become successful early so that they start to believe that this is something that they can do. So in this first tile that we're looking at getting started, in the mail, when you select that you want to become a beauty consultant, you get you get a package, and it includes some cosmetics, and it includes information about the types of support mechanisms that Mary Kay offers to consultants. And that includes how to create a business plan and some marketing materials, and a few other things to help kickstart that journey. One of the first things that you get is a really nice video from Mary Kay talking about what their organization offers and how it can empower individuals. And she talks a lot about her own journey. I'll skip over that and move on to kind of the next thing, which is really interesting. It starts to get into some individualization of content. And we're going to talk about some frameworks that outline this later. This section starts to explore, well, why have you decided to become a beauty consultant, and kind of help reflect on what is your goal, what do you hope to achieve? And as you start answering questions like, I'm interested in doing this because I'm financially responsible for me and my family, and I'm looking for new opportunities. And I won't read all these questions, but as you start answering a few things, what it ends up doing is it populates with videos of mostly women who are like you. And it talks about how they became successful. And these are all people who have succeeded as Mary Kay beauty consultants, and they're sharing why they decided to go on this journey, what it's helped them do. And it starts to seed with that new learner that it's possible to succeed in this field.
That is, these are people who answered those same questions the same way you did.
Correct.
Right? So you have a kinship with them.
Correct. The next thing that's interesting is, okay, so now you've kind of gone through that, and there's been a few probing questions. The process, or the suggested process for selling cosmetics, is to make the statement and the journey uniquely yours in your own words when you're talking to folks, because they'll ask you, so why'd you become a Mary Kay beauty consultant? And getting and creating that I story so that it rolls off your tongue is a nice thing to have in your pocket when this is the first time that you've ever been in sales, so that you can start to relate to the other person. So here you fill in some information, and it creates a little bit of performance support that you can use later. This is something that you can print, and you can make a nice little card with it and carry it with you. So but before you go up and ring the next doorbell, you can have some time to practice that. You learn a little bit more about what's in your starter kit, but then what's really neat is you get an opportunity to create a business plan. And so you put in the budget that you want to spend for the month. You might say, hey, I'm willing to spend $500 to have some cosmetics of my own, to have some marketing available to me, and to get started. And so you put in your budget here. I don't know that's super necessary for me to demonstrate, but then you start to say, hey, I'm willing to spend, $100 maybe on creating a website. And that's something that I want to add to my plan. So you go in here and you type in, I want to spend $100 to have a great website. And the materials that are sent in the package give you some information about what's a realistic amount to budget for. And there's some more information that you can click to here. Special delivery, I think this talks right to being able to drop ship cosmetics to the people that buy from you. And I want to add that to my plan. And so it's starting to letting me know what my monthly total cost for setting this up is. Once I hit submit and I set my business plan, it ends up only then giving me the tiles that match up with that business plan. So I'm going to be dropped only into training that's relevant to the business that I want to start, all with the goal of getting you to have that first sale as soon as possible, to get you excited that this is something that you really can do.
And it's been very, very successful, having impact. They have over 3 million now beauty consultants. There's no other way that it could have provided such a personalized learning experience. And it goes all the way from providing performance support, to giving you the tools to use to actually perform, and the training that's integrated all the way through it. So everything is purposeful for the trainee. They really understand why we're doing this. It's not just we're memorizing principles of making a good sale, but they're actually practicing, seeing it in context, and having people to mentor them as they have questions.
So that's just one example of what really good could look like. And we've got interesting data on how that is succeeding for organizations. Now we're going to move into a part of our presentation talking about some of the frameworks and tools that we use to help organizations frame and prioritize what it is that they really need to deliver and want to deliver to get great business impact. And for this section, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Great. So we all live inside of a complex adaptive system, which is our organization. And understanding the range of complexities and how they interrelate is super important. I'm sure we all have heard the term learning ecosystems, but what does it really mean? And so when we think about this, we consider it to be a place where people and process and measurement analytics and experience is really aligned and supported with technology, but really aligned with the business strategy. And while that sounds really wonderful, how do you unpack the complexities that are inside of your organization? How do you understand and situate things in context so that you can start to identify areas that you can actually impact inside of your business or for your business in some way? So while this is a model, what we've developed is something called the Learning Ecosystem Canvas. Now, this is a great tool that is very useful at understanding key elements of your learning ecosystem. This was built on something called the Business Model Canvas, which is used in the startup community, and we've adapted it and adopted it to help to understand how you might constrain the complexity of your learning ecosystem and find areas that you could actually focus on. So how do you get to an answer like the Mary Kay solution or other solutions? Well, first, the step is zooming out and really understanding the business. So there are really 9 major elements associated with this. At the core, in the center there, is the value proposition. What are you really trying to deliver as far as value to your learners? And on the right side, then, we start to focus on what are the learner relationships that are present today. How do you want to change that learning relationship? And then ultimately, it's very useful to understand what are your learner segments? What are the different types of journeys that people are taking? And then if you're delivering a value proposition to your learners and developing this relationship, how are you going to measure the impact of that value proposition? What are the different ways that you can start to think about how you're not just creating impact for the learner, but also for the business? And then any dream, takes rubber to get to the road. And so who are the partners you have inside of your organization? What partners do you have access to deliver on this value proposition? And what are the activities and the resources that are necessary? And then what are the investment drivers? If you're going to make an impact, how will you do that? There is, and I will pop it into the chat, there is a blog post taking this a little bit deeper on the Allen Interactions website. But you can use this if you're new in a job to understand the organization. You can use this to just stop and really consider where you're at in your organization. And you can also use this in a way collaboratively with your team. I have so many fantastic stories of people using this. One organization collected 1,732 data points using this. So once you get a capture of information on this, it's really good to consider everything holistically. And then you could say, well, I want to impact this learner segment or this learner journey, and we want to develop this type of relationship. And here are the channels that we're going to use to reach this learner journey or segment. And here's the value. And out of all of the complexity, you can start to identify points and linkages between the key items here and understand what are the partners or activities or resources and how you frame the investment. This gives you a very common tool and framework to have language that aligns with the business and starts to consider business impact moving ahead. And so just a notional example from an organization. Here we have some value proposition that was defined. Really want to provide intentional relevant journeys for users. This is some summary information here. So there were lots of data points, but really getting people the right time, at the right time, the right thing, and identified some learner segments and some summary of value metrics. But you might have tens or even hundreds of items that are on this. It's wonderful. There are templates on the blog post that you can print out and really start to think about this.
Mike, you've used this and we've used this together at a bunch of different places. Can you speak to a little bit about how the conversation changes before and after using a tool like this between the types of partners and stakeholders that an organization needs to drive the right sort of value and the learners that they're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is fantastic to use for your L&D team. The more that you can get the business involved with this, the better. One of the key things that becomes intuitively obvious is that the partners that you need to have on board that may be outside of learning and development in order to actually make real transformation and impact. The idea that you can use this tool to understand not just your learning ecosystem today, but your learning ecosystem in the future starts to give you clear ideas of the partners and types of activities and the resources that you need. Not only that, though, understanding clearly how it will impact the business and what the investment drivers are gives you all the ammo that you need to have those right conversations with the business.
And I know you said several times, and most often when we kick off a workshop together, that don't always assume that technology is the answer. And when we start filling out a canvas like this together, you can really start to poke holes in the sorts of demands that might be put on an L&D professional, which gets us into that feeling of just being order takers. Well, if we just had the right technology, why all this would be easier. It's so much more than just having better video and better displays, right? And it's more about let's make sure that we're focused in on providing the right types of solutions and not so much on the bells and whistles or the how we're gonna make that happen.
Well, and people that go through this process end up saying things like, wow, now I really understand my space. Wow, I feel sane again. Wow, I know where I need to focus.
Do we have any questions in the chat? I wonder, I see there's a number.
Well, Liz said the canvases are helpful for IDing, verbalizing the fuel for the right type of conversations.
They really are. It's a simple thing, and I think it's easy to look at a table or a chart or something and say, well, that's nice. But this is much more than nice. It's much more than nice. That's why it's appropriate to call it a tool, because it can accomplish some of the changes of conversation and collaboration that we've had so much trouble achieving in all the various ways we've tried.
So the next tool that we'll introduce here is a matrix matching what are the appropriate instructional strategies to take for the types of desired outcomes or performances that you're looking for from your employee base. And I will pass this over to you to present.
Okay. So I used to work in artificial intelligence, and the offices next to me included people who were doing weather prediction, and next to them were some of the military systems who were developing video analysis technology so planes could fly over a geographic area multiple times. And of course, they never were in exactly the same position. The sun was never in exactly the same position and so forth. And yet, those systems could determine what equipment and troops and so forth had moved one place to another. And over in meteorology, they're saying we have so many millions of data points that seem to be absolutely necessary for us to come up with anything close to a weather prediction. And both of these teams were saying, you guys are just in training. I love it. Just in training. How difficult can it be? Saying, well, if you would think of the human mind as a computer, I think that mind is a lot more complex than anything else you're dealing with. And indeed, to help people learn to train, there's a lot that goes on in people's heads during this period. And some of it's constructive and some of it's not. But just like the sun being in a different position, people are very different and they respond to things differently and so on. So the challenge is really significant to create high impact, highly efficient learning experiences. And yet over decades now, I've been trying to simplify the concepts for people who build training because so often people think it's just so overwhelmingly difficult and I don't have much time, so I'll create a few PowerPoints and that's going to do it. Well, it doesn't do it. It doesn't do it. It doesn't create skills. It can create some awareness and familiarity, but if you really want people to perform at a higher level of proficiency, it takes more. So what are the right things to do and how simple, without making it too simple, can I make it? So my first notion is, what are the different kinds of outcomes we're striving for? And with your permission, I have simplified this down to bare bones, I think, but it still sort of works. The first outcome we'd like people to be able to follow our instructions. So we've mapped out exactly what we want them to do, and we want them to do that. So that's one level of training or outcome. The second level, a little more advanced, is we would like them to do what we want them to do without reading it off a checklist, so forth. They're in a situation, they're assessing the situation, they're following instructions, and they're reaching a goal. The third level is to become expert. To be able to perform expertly means looking at a situation that you haven't been explicitly trained on, but you can still perform very well. And you can solve the problem, fix the system, deliver the performance, whatever it may be. I think those are really the three big categories. One is we're going to be there with you and we're going to be telling you exactly what to do. The task's probably pretty simple. Then there's another is you're out there, so you got to remember this stuff and do it without looking it up all the time. And the third is performing expertly. So if I look out across the world to see what kind of instructional strategies do people use for these three intended outcomes, the typical strategies are present information. Well, that makes sense for following instructions. We just need to provide them really clear, well laid out instructions. For the next level, we should do something more, shouldn't we? But what typically happens is that people think, oh, okay, I need to provide them more information. I need to tell them more about this so that maybe they'll remember more. Yeah, and to perform expertly, well, of course, we provide even more information. So it seems like our instructional strategy is providing people information. And if providing people information were effective instructionally, then we wouldn't have schools, right? We'd have just libraries where all that information is there and everybody is going to become expert. Well, of course, that doesn't work. And we need to do something much more proactive. So let's ask the question, what would be an appropriate instructional strategy? And at first blush, I would say following instructions really just needs performance support. What we often call PSS, performance support systems, which are basically, here's the information available to you at the time of performance. You will have time to check it. You don't have to remember it. You just have to understand how to do each one of the instructions and perform it, and we're done. For being more autonomous, what we really need to do is provide guided practice. So you need to develop both the skills and the confidence to perform, and that only comes through practice. And the practice, to be efficient, should be guided, sensitive to the individual performer. If they're doing really well consistently early on, we can say, okay, they've got it. But for people whose performance is somewhat erratic, we want to find out where the problem is and give them the right kind of practice to overcome the issues that they're having and get them as proficient as soon as possible. And then for experts, we really need to challenge them with a variety of situations so they realize that they're learning general principles that can apply in many situations but may not apply in all situations. And we want to simulate the outcomes of their performance so they can see what the risks are of making a mistake, what the successes are of doing things right, and the more of those simulated situations we can have people practice through, the higher their level of expertise is going to come. I thought this was pretty good, but after presenting this to a number of audiences and asking, have I oversimplified? I got some feedback that, yeah, you oversimplified a bit. And I'm really happy to have that feedback, because I needed to make a bit of a change to it, which I think now has made this view quite valuable and robust. And that feedback said, you really need to consider the complexity of a task and its risk. Now, complexity of a task isn't just only in looking at the task itself, but it's looking at the entry abilities that people have. And so, something, if I'm trying to teach somebody to play the piano and I'm working with them on triplets, for example, if they can't read a score at all and don't know the notes, that's a really complex task for them. I mean, it's too tough, But if you're already able to read a score and you can say on the piano, you can translate those little dots on the paper to the right keys to press, then we can start getting into triplets and more complex things. So what's complex for one person isn't necessarily complex for another person. However, risk is a nature of the task to perform. And if somebody is going to die, or a piece of equipment is going to explode, or we're going to lose a lot of money, or whatever it might be, then that suggests that we need some guided practice, even for following instructions, so that they build confidence in following those instructions and know exactly how to perform each step along the way. That's borrowed from remembering and following instructions. But again, if that is complex or it's risky, then we need to borrow from the challenge and simulate methodology and bring that over into this outcome target. And then finally, it stays the same for performing expertly. Practice is always important, I think, and always valuable. So we really want to see as much of that as we can provide. I think if training programs would just adhere to this practice, the benefit to organizations of their training programs would rise very measurably, very, very much. And we have to stop this notion of just telling people what to do, or even telling people how to do it is going to achieve a lot of business goals, because most things that are important and valuable just aren't that simple. So there you are. In a nutshell.
In a nutshell.
In one graph.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
I can see that Mike is responding to a bunch of things that are going on in chat. Is there anything that we ought to address before moving to the final final framework?
You're asking Mike?
I am.
Mike is muted.
And stoic.
Oh, oh yeah.
Oh, there we go. I think this is fantastic. And it's in combination with thinking about the learning ecosystem broadly and constraining it to a specific space. This is a tool that can, and a method of thinking that can get you to a good answer very quickly.
And it is something that people in the C-suite can understand pretty quickly too.
If they would just follow these instructions.
Right.
You're welcome. So the last one is the behavior catalog, and like learning ecosystems and the learning ecosystem canvas. There's more to find on this online if you go to behaviorcatalog.com. But I'll first present this using part of the Mary Kay example, and then I'll build this out. And this is a simplified version of a behavior catalog. So both using the matrix that we just discussed and the centered dialogue around what sort of value do you want to deliver with training with the ecosystem canvas. This really talks about the very specific outcomes that you want to have happen. So at the top of a chapter inside the behavior catalog, what sort of objective are we looking for? And that's to create a successful new beauty consultant. For each individual beauty consultant, it's going to have a range of revenue impact, and I've obscured it here, but you get the idea that each new one that's successful is going to have some direct bottom line impact to the organization. So if we just start to think about, what are the top level behaviors that are really important for that new consultant to be able to do, we can start creating a prioritized list of how should we tackle training and at what level of spending is going to be required. So over here on the left, what are the individual behaviors? Who performs them? How does the business measure them? And then the performance outcomes and the prescription to treat that particular behavior are listed over here on the right. So something like being able to deliver a genuine and believable I statement about why you've gone on this journey to become a beauty consultant. Well, we might say that's at the performance outcome of being able to remember and deliver that. We're not asking someone to do something new or extemporaneous in the moment, but this is something that should be somewhat practiced enough that without prompting that they are able to deliver it. And it's critical. There's a little bit of risk to the overall outcome there, so it's something that we might push all the way up to the point of let's challenge and simulate that. And so that rolls down. So when I start thinking about working with an organization, it's think of a single business objective and keep it small. If I'm successful with that, doing that once, what does that mean in dollars? I think for a lot of folks, you can probably just stop there. If we think about training from, we want to achieve this outcome, and this outcome means this dollar impact. Can I have this amount of budget to make this happen for you? I think we're talking about something other than how quickly can we deliver training and can we stay under budget. We're really talking about the needs of whoever is operating that business unit. We're really talking about all the stakeholders about what do they need in order to see that they're successful. Then we start working with that organization and saying, what do talented people do to achieve this particular objective? What do they feel is the most important thing to do, and where do they put their attention? And then this gives us a nice list of what are the top behaviors that achieve this particular outcome. Who performs these behaviors? Depending on the type of outcome, it could be multiple people, and it could be multiple roles. So it's good to list list out who are all the actors working together in concert to achieve the outcome. Does the business capture any performance data already? Does performing this behavior show up on someone's performance report? Is it analyzed over, like, how many new leads are we getting? Are they qualified marketing leads? Do we have the right net promoter score for customer service when they try to return a product? That then starts to lead us now back into, again, the matrix. For this performance, for this actor, how do we want them to perform, or at what level of fidelity do we want them to perform, and what's the right prescription to support that? With this simple chart, I think you can have a much better conversation with stakeholders about what should training really be providing the business with, and coming to the table with an idea that's in their language, in the language of the business. This is the outcome that you're looking for. This is what it means to you. This is how you want, at what level do you want your people to perform? And this is how, as an L&D professional, I'm proposing that we support that. And it could be thinking back about that chart where we've got many things that might be follow instructions. Maybe the right solution is performance support or something other than training. And if it's all the way over at the other end where we're looking to really build experts, we don't want a training budget that just aligns with providing information. We want a training budget for this particular behavior that actually creates experts. And you should be able then to refer back to this chart after an intervention has been provided and say, did we achieve a better rate on the objective that we were looking for? Have our revenues gone up, or have our costs gone down in an interesting way, and are we on track? I'm just going to pop open the chat here. We'll have a few minutes for Q&A, but if there are any questions on any of the models that we've presented here today, now might be a great time to take a break and answer those. So I will monitor the chat here and see if there aren't a few more things that we can address. Got a few folks looking for books and other resources, and thanks for Mike for putting links and some more context in there.
Well, if there aren't any questions, people always like to have class in early.
Sure.
Christopher, I can ask you a question.
Yes,
so
sure.
if I use something like the Learning Eco Canvas and I get some targeted areas, I mean, I probably could build a pretty big set of these. And if I built that set, I mean, does that give me something that I can really work in partnership? So if my L&D organization is part of the business unit, does this give me the ability to say no to stuff and say, well, this isn't going to help the business. Why would I make this training that doesn't have a lot of impact? Can't we focus on this? Doesn't it make me a performance partner?
I think it does make someone a performance partner. When we speak with other L&D teams together and they talk about, what are their pain points and what are their challenges, the things that they're being measured on, their measure of success really tends to be how fast can you put something out. And it might be because when someone has identified that training is needed, they've kind of exhausted all of their other options for getting the performance that they're after. And if they've exhausted all of their other options and they think that they're down to, well, it must be a training problem, they might not be looking holistically, but why is this particular performance difficult? And when you're the last option, it's a little hard to push back and say, we've been working with these roles and with these students before, and we, as an L&D expert, I feel somewhat confident that they can do some of these things, but maybe not all of them. Wouldn't it be better to focus in on just a few things instead of throw all the information information at them. And I think the key to no longer being an order taker and to being a performance partner is really matching up and talking their language. And the hope then would be is you can start to share and develop these chapters in the behavior catalog early and throughout the year and be proactive and say, hey, I'm looking at our curriculum and I'm seeing some holes in the types of performances I know that our business wants this year. You know, we've got these strategic objectives that we're looking to have happen. As an L&D professional, I know they're poorly supported in our current curriculum. Can I have the budget to address them? And then you're no longer an order taker. And I think people would be receptive and excited to give budget to something that could make a better impact.
So David has asked a really interesting question: is educating stakeholders painful? It can certainly be frustrating. There's no doubt about that. But I've talked with a bunch of CEOs about this very process, and what I hear from them is that they feel people come to them unprepared. And if people are unprepared, they're starting to think, I don't have time for this. Mm-hmm. I think if you use the behavior catalog, it'll give you confidence and show that you are prepared. And then you'll have actually a rewarding conversation and you won't feel bad. I think we feel nervous going in, like, what are they going to ask? And will I have the answers? But if you can kind of, it's hard with some individual, but if you can kind of take charge of the conversation and show that you've done your homework and you've laid things out, and here's your perspective that you are sincerely trying to address behavioral needs, I think you'll get not only reception, but encouragement. And in most cases, it really works. Now, what you might find out is that if you bring in this chart and they start talking with you about it, they might very well say, you know what, as I'm looking at this, I think there's another business objective that's really higher on my priority list. That's going to happen. And that's actually a good outcome. It's not a bad outcome. It might feel like I did all this work and now you want me to put it on the shelf. But still, alignment and partnering with leadership is what you want to get in the habit of. And once you get that happening, then it's not going to be painful anymore.
And to piggyback on that a little bit, so the pain and the frustration can both be for the stakeholders and for those trying to educate them. In our experience, co-creating with the stakeholders is the easiest way to get buy-in, and using the tools to define the space that you're working in and define and set priority with the learning ecosystem canvas, and then doing the work with L&D and then bringing the results has a process that they're buying into, because they know what the whole map looks like. They know where you're focusing. They've defined the business objectives, and you're bringing them the prescription to get those business objectives.
If you have the chat window open, I'll point you to one of the last links that Rich Peterson shared. We've got a newer white paper that covers these models and a few more for starting to think about how to become a trusted performance partner and working with your organization to both future-proof how your L&D department works, but also your workforce in the future. So we got just a couple minutes left, and I think we might as well wrap up and say thanks for joining us. I'll put one quick pitch in here for the Allen Academy. We've got a set of 4 courses that go together being presented by Ethan Edwards. Our next cohort is going to start here in January, and it's an opportunity to get real practical experience both with designing instructional interactivity, building it in the tools that you use at work, and getting some professional coaching on how to make the work that you're delivering for your students better. And certainly something that we'd love to have you take a look at and read more about at allenacademy.com.
Did you say how they get that white paper?
Yes, it's linked in the chat.
Oh, okay, good. Very good. It's something in the chat.
Cool. Yes, you're welcome.
Well, thanks everybody for coming today. I hope we've used your hour wisely and beneficially. We really just want to help everybody succeed in this noble business of helping people reach proficiency. So thank you very, very much.
Right. Thanks, everybody. Have a terrific afternoon.
Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your day.